Joining now to talk more about this is Stephen Fish. He is a political science professor at the University of California in Berkeley. Stephen, it's good to have you with us this hour.
My pleasure.
When it comes to retaliation, a wide range of sanctions that have been levied by the United States against Russia, but again, what might you expect to see from the Kremlin in response?
It's hard to know. These sanctions are the kind of thing that countries do in these circumstances. They really aren't that big a deal, the kind of what you would expect. I think that the Russians will probably respond in kind with perhaps expelling some American diplomats from the country. I don't think it will be all that big an action on their part, though.
Safe to say the response from Russia so far hasn't been very diplomatic. I want you to take a look at a portion of a statement released from the Foreign Ministry spokesperson saying, quote, "It's over. The curtain's down. A bad play is over. The whole world, from first seats to the balcony, is witnessing a destructive blow on America's prestige and leadership that has been dealt by Barack Obama and his hardly literate foreign policy team that revealed its main secret to the world, its exceptionally masked helplessness." That doesn't seem all that well, let's say it as I would say in Texas, that doesn't seem all that diplomatic.
No, it's not diplomatic, but it's kind of what you expect under these circumstances. Look, what's really strange here is to have a president-elect whose loyalty to the United States is in question. This is what's odd. It wasn't President Obama who dealt a blow to American prestige. It's President-elect Trump who's doing that right now. And President Obama finds himself in a very, very difficult position. Never before have we had a president-elect coming to office who seemed to take more seriously and to respect more a foreign dictator who regards the United States as his sworn enemy. Then he takes and respects that even more than he respects the American government and American intelligence agencies. This is a very strange circumstance. And so President Obama is trying to put in place some measures that will slow Trump's ability to sell the shop to the Russians. I think that's really what's going on here.
Well, you know, that question, so President-elect Trump has made it clear that he would like to improve relations with Russia. But obviously, the world will be watching how this plays out when the new president takes the oath of office. U.S. allies will be particularly concerned. The question, if the United States won't stand up for itself, well, would they stand up for us in these alliances?
Exactly. No, President-elect Trump has been very cavalier about his defense of NATO and American alliances. That gives our allies cause for alarm, needless to say. So, you know, this is a very unusual situation. President-elect Trump today was the way he dismissed this Russian cyber attack on the United States as saying it's some problem of the computer age where we don't really understand who is doing what to whom anymore. This is simply bizarre. American intelligence agencies understand perfectly well what's going on. It's just for some reason President-elect Trump doesn't want to believe it. This puts the United States in a very strange position. And now we're going to see if America has leadership, especially the Republican Party of the United States, whether its congressmen and its foreign policy leaders outside government will actually stand up to Trump and try to, in fact, correct some of what looks like are going to be some very bizarre policy decisions on his part.
Let's circle back to sanctions just briefly here in the final question for you in this segment, but the idea of sanctions, do they really work? Because we saw the United States level sanctions against Russia before Crimea was annexed. Did sanctions matter then? Will they matter now? Is it an effective tool?
Well, sanctions are a partially effective tool. They do bite. The sanctions on Russia that were applied after the incursion into East Ukraine and after the annexation of Crimea have induced some pain. Of course, the Russians aren't going to withdraw from Crimea in response to this. The same thing will happen here. They're not going to stop their cyber attacks because of this. But keep in mind that Obama is taking these measures, not thinking that it's going to transform Russian behavior, but hoping that it will affect American behavior in the future. He's hoping that it would be very difficult for Trump to rescind these sanctions. If he does, if he comes to office and says, as he said recently, it's time to move on, what he's going to be doing is basically saying either that he continues to deny that Russia is engaging in these activities, which I think is going to be increasingly hard for him to do after he takes office, or he's going to have to say, basically, it's okay if Russia does these kinds of things to us, which of course the Russians would never do. if we do those kinds of things to them. So I think Obama's trying to guard the United States now against Trump, not against Putin.
And obviously, the big question would be when the new president takes the oath of office, would he roll back these sanctions that have been put in place by the U.S. President Barack Obama? Stephen Fish, thank you so much for being with us, for your insight today.
My pleasure, George.